Hi there, I'm Clifford Bates, and welcome to the beginning of a new series. This is Thucydides and the Peloponnesian War. Now, why am I going to do Thucydides? Well, Thucydides is a very interesting fellow in terms of what he is. He's a kind of he is kind of like people say he's the first historian. Please forgive me. First kind of modern historian, but he's not, because modern historians will criticize the kind of approach that he takes. Um, he will make up stories. He'll give us the evidence it gives will sometimes be kind of his presentation of things. Speeches are not necessarily recorded of actual speeches, but rather things that he will concoct or create to make representative of things. Thucydides, what he was an Athenian. He was an Athenian strategos, a general, right? The word general is like this: a strategos, one who makes strategies for the city, both in this sense of both land and sea. Okay, they didn't have the distinction we do. They do have navy versus army. Because they were uh, um, the way that the geographic reality of Athens and its dependence upon the sea, or its commerce and trade and its life of fishing, as well as this land based. Athens was kind of a combined arm, both sea and land. In fact, naval warfare was more like infantry warfare in that sense, rather than how we envision warfare today, or even in of the 18th and 16th, 17th, and 18th century. Okay, naval warfare. So it's not the same kind of. It's basically moving of men who would fight each other on ships, not like ship to ship, but men to men. Um, and often they would usually this light infantry tactics against each other. And sometimes they would put heavily armed soldiers on the thing. Okay, so therefore the nature of Greek warfare, and um, this is why this first video is more about Thucydides than what we're going to do. We're going to be looking at the Thucydides Peloponnesian War using the landmark Thucydides edition, which even though it's the translation is not the best, and every translation is problematic because it can never really catch the whole and subtlety of the original Greek, but it's the best one because of the maps, the care it did. It took an older translation and it worked on it. This was published originally in the early 1990s, published by Free Press. This whole edition set was very interesting. It got Victor Davis Hanson, who was known as a Greek military history guide, to kind of bring some introduction thing. He didn't do the translation or even edited it, but he wrote a couple forwards and some articles in here about Greek warfare that edits it. So this book has lots of stuff onto it. It will have sections and appendices on Greek warfare, Greek economy, Greek things like this. So it's a very good book if you want to understand the way ancient warfare and ancient conflict did. So students of history and students of international affairs and students of politics should love this book. For those who are interested in kind of more esoteric or philosophic aspects, and also the questions of the gods, more questions the concern with the theopolitical arguments of Thucydides, particularly those people interested, like students of Strauss, they're going to be less happy with this translation. As Paul Ray in his rather good review of this translation in the Claremont Review of Books, if I remember correctly, highlighted, and I think this is a fair point. But for our purposes, for most people who are interested in political things and history and the conflict of states, and the seeing how Thucydides is the father of our thinking about political things. In fact, this is the tension between Thucydides and non-Thucydides, which is Plato or Aristotle, right? Not so much Aristotle and Thucydides are kind of like Plato and Thucydides are kind of really polar opposites. Where Plato thinks about the high things. Now, Thucydides will talk about those high things, but in relationship always to the city. Aristotle is the middle position between those two. The concern but the concern of Thucydides is always struggle, warfare, the concept of warfare, struggle. That this history is about warfare and struggle and this contestation, this continually contestation. we know from our point of view, we know that Thucydides plays a very important role in English political theory. Why? It was in Thucydides' Peloponnesian Wars was first translated into English directly from the Greek was from Thomas Hobbes. Thomas Hobbes' translation is the first real English translation of the Greek, and it's a very good translation. Hobbes understood Greek very well, and he shares, Hobbes's fear of anarchy, of civil war. In fact, this is the whole point of Thucydides. Thucydides gives a daring account of what happens of the Coratia, Korahian, a city that becomes in terms of civil war, and how the civil war, the stasis of the civil war, destroys the city. It leads them to become barbaric in destruction. And for Thucydides, this is a warning that war and strife will lead eventually to this. Hobbes agrees with this. Hobbes's understanding of the state of nature. Nature is without an order or political order establishing to maintain peace. That human beings will always be in stasis with each other, conflict, contestation. That the state of nature is this contestation, which is inhuman, which is destructive, and therefore, man, we need to escape from it. So, in many ways, we can understand a kind of very narrow Epicureanistic Thucydidean understanding. You can see the origins of Hobbesian political theory, which is, and Hobbesian political thought is basically the basis of all liberal, except for Spinoza. Spinoza's kind of a little smiley version, but so is Hobbes. Hobbes is the father of modern liberalism. That we must escape this horrific nature, that we need to create institutions to allow us to escape nature, and that to allow us to create peace. Nomos, the phusis is that of war. Nomos, which brings order, brings peace, in this Thucydidean sense. This kind of very sophistic, the sophist nomos phusis division. And one opposed to the more Platonic complex conception, or even Aristotelian conception, of where the nomos is kind of a reflection of the phusis for Plato, where Aristotle, nomos can be an intermediary thing between mere convention and or human making, arbitrary human making versus what his nature requires. In that sense, habit becomes that middle ground between nature and convention, right? So I'm giving this general account here to kind of give us a warning about Thucydides, to understand what he's doing. Now, Thucydides' Peloponnesian War is divided in 8 books. 8 books, if I remember correctly. I hope I could be wrong, but I think it's 8 books. But they're not either. But again, the chapters and the subsections of the chapters are not evenly equal amongst them. In fact, I should get an account here. I don't have my account here. An account of all the different varieties of this. I know I did it one time, but I'm not going to go hunt it down. I could waste a second or two. But that's neither here. You can go look at Google, go look at something on Wikipedia, look at the chapters and look at this, and you'll see the fact that the books are not perfectly even with each other. And this book is incomplete. He doesn't finish it at the end. In fact, some people argues that it takes Xenophon's and his Hellenica to kind of complete the second half of the Xenophon takes up the task of kind of completing what Thucydides did not. But Xenophon's style is completely different. Xenophon, a student of Socrates, goes about it in a completely different manner. So Thucydides' account is also different from the Homeric poet account. The great war of the Greek was the Trojan War between the Greek and the Asian. Okay, this is the first kind of conflict of civilization, right? And that the Greeks win. Okay, the next big and that's Homer. Now, Homer gives us that the Trojan versus the Greek Hellenist, the Hellene. The next war, and some would even argue this was a civil war in that sense. This was the great civil war that divided, that the Hellene and the Trojans, and that were not alienated from each other. There's a missing account of the great. There's a great historians argue that the Greek world of this was kind of one time a great empire, so that the Trojan War assumes that there was a unity, a great unity that led to stasis and that led to divide, right? But there's also another idea, that the mythos of Atlantis, right? This is the great war, the city, the cosmos in motion, the city in war of Plato and his it's presented, and I think it's in the Theages and elsewhere. There's this idea of this account of Atlantis with the cities in motion, and that this is the cosmos is in motion, and this is the war. But we don't get a real any account of this, and but Plato's account attempted this is kind of never fully developed. Instead, what we get in Plato is kind of the city in speech, the city in deed, more the laws in that sense established during the city in speech is in Plato's Republic. You don't get the cosmos. You get the cosmos kind of in Theages, but um, in Thucydides you get the greatest motion. Now it is the Peloponnesian War, civil war, a war between the Hellenes, the Greeks, and it is kind of and the Peloponnesian War, and what it does is it weakens it such that which will eventually happen is the Macedonians will come to get control. A Macedonian political actor will come. The northern hillbillies, not really as sophisticated and developed, more tribal, more less not really political in that character. These tribal people, but good warriors, will first gain prominence within Thebes by being, Philip becomes the captive of. This is how the Thebans, the great hero, but then he becomes Thebes, the great heroic city that established itself after Sparta's victory and Sparta's over Athens, but then Sparta's attempt to dominate the other Greek cities led to the rise of the Thebans, who then crushed the Spartans, right, and freed the Helots from the Melians from the control of Sparta, and destroy Sparta. I could destroy it, but reduce its power significantly, and reduce its power and ability to wage power over other Greek cities. We don't get this account. This is the account that comes a little bit within Xenophon's Hellenica, but not completely. You get the second part of the rise and kind of beginning fall of Spartan power. In Thucydides' account, you get basically the story of the war and how this is, and the war wears out Greece, and therefore the northern tribes come, and Philip Macedon establishes rule over the Greek cities, and then his son Alexander will take these Greek cities and then conquer the Persian Empire. Now, the other great Greek historian that we haven't talked about is Hesiod. And Hesiod isn't famous because Hesiod gives us the Persian War. He gives an account of the origins of time, development of this, the rise of the Greeks, and then the Great Persian War, and that's the second conflict. So if Homer gives us the first great conflict of the Trojan War, it's Hesiod who gives us the great civilizational conflict between Athenian civilization, the Greek civilization, versus Persian civilization, right? And this is the victory of Athens, the smaller, the Hellenic people, over the stopping Persia, and that's not winning over Persia, but stopping. And that Thucydides gives us the war amongst the Greeks after the victory led by the Athenians. So Athenian victory, and particularly the naval victory over the Persians. It is the naval victory over Persia that changes Athens from a kind of more conservative democracy to a more radical democracy, and then it becomes an empire. It becomes a great military empire, causing envy among the other commercial state, who's a Peloponnesian state, Carthage. Not Carthage. Sorry, not Carthage. Corinth. Corinth, that state that's in the Peloponnese, as a border between Peloponnese and the Attica. Um, Sparta, who was a great ally, who helped fight, who felt stop the kind of held back the Persian invasion. You know, the Greek Athenians on themselves uh, pushed back the first wave of a Persian incursion into that with the victory at Marathon. But then a decade later, what will happen is the son of that king will come back and will try to achieve victory. And what happened is at Thermopylae, the Spartans, the 300 Spartans, the 300, right, tried to hold them back, but failed. The Athenians abandon their city and fight that Salamis and defeat the navy. And then this creates an ally of naval war that will then drive, in fact, all of Sparta, all of Greece will then, under Athens leadership, but also Sparta leadership, will the Athenians will then, with the Spartans, kick out the Spartans from the land victory at playtime. Themistocles will become the great naval strategist, Salamis, and the strategies of these events. But then he will himself be exiled from. Themistocles wanted to actually impose a kind of order. He doesn't do it because Agathon, the great just, Agathon the Just, um, uh, 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 when Themistocles says, well, once we've conquered the Persians, kicked them out, and we have all their ships here, why don't we destroy everyone else's ships? That's what that was his advice. He wasn't going to say this to democracy. He said, if I say this, we say this, that we can't do it, then we will know it. So I will tell whoever you pick someone, and I will tell what I suggest, and he will tell you whether it's just or not. And they pick Ariston, uh, uh, um, um, Ariston, Agath, I think it's Agathon, yeah. Let's get his name right. Famous Ariston, the man who is just one, right? He is so just that even there's a joke when the city people say, "Oh, this guy Ariston, everyone thinks he's so great. I want to get him out." And the guy goes, He helped someone who was going to call for his ostracization with spelling his name correctly. This is the famous story of him in that sense. But he will then, Themistocles will tell him what he's planning. He will then say to the jury, I'm not going to say what it is. What Thucydides recommends is advantageous, but it's not just. And the Athenians would vote against the plan because it's of the claim here. Now, that is in Hesiod. Okay, the Hesiod gives us the Persian War, the rise of Greek, the conflict between Persia and the Greek victory. But it's not a complete victory. It doesn't destroy Persia. It's kind of, and the Persian king kind of says it's not worth his cost. He tries to interfere. In fact, this is the whole point. He will start interfering in the supporting as the Peloponnesian War is going. He will play both sides. Both sides will appeal to him, and this part is addressed more in Xenophon's Hellenica than in Thucydides. And then the final account is the Alexandrian account. The Alexander's account of the history of Alexander's campaign, where he conquers Persia. He attacks Persia, he defeats Persia, and he conquers it, and then moves on to the other. He conquers its territories, then conquers it, and then he assumes his global empire. This is from the Hellenic. This is from the the Greek period, then the Hellenistic, right? The Hellenic, there's the Hellenistic, right? This shift of that, which it is under Hellenistic, as post Alexandrian world of this new global economy that he unleashed with trade from India and through India, China, that Rome will emerge into. Rome, who was just a backwater, backwater city, who then establishes control over Italy and then becomes a major player both by fighting the Carthaginians, who are the last of the Phoenicians, and then the Greeks, the Macedonian ruled Greeks. Okay, and then slowly gets power, and it conquers the Ptolemean Egyptians. By time of Caesar, the Romans will conquer not only this the Carthaginian and the Greek, but also the Assyrians. That was captured by the Assyrian area, which is Palestine, and that was conquered by Ptolemy in that sense. Then a Caesar will establish control over. Uh, um, um, Ptolemy also gets those two, the Assyrians and the Egyptians, to kind of play ball with Rome, and therefore this is the Roman world, right? This is the beginning of Rome, and then the collapse. And as Rome eventually assumes total dominion and global control over all those regions, it will establish its reign over the Mediterranean. Okay, in that sense, and also in Gaul and most of Europe, right? This is the empire that will last huge. It lasts, until the fall of what remains of it will last in Byzantine, but it will fall in Constantinople. But this is the kind of historical sketch. So why did I go through this history? Kind of to see where Thucydides plays within this. Thucydides plays a very important role. His analysis of conflict and strategy and things like this will be shaped in IR theory, the ideas of realism. Even though realism as IR theory has no connection really to Thucydides or this thing that realist theory does not own realpolitik or to Machiavelli or to this or even to Thucydides. It owes more to the kind of position of the post-liberal, the rejection of the liberal model of IR started by Kant, Hegel, not Hegel, but Kant, uh, the English school of the Manchester and liberals approach of commercial politics, commercial trade, and global hegemony through trade and commerce. And then the idea that you can have global peace, that Wilsonian kind of liberalism kind of released, of this idea that global nation states could cooperate together to form governing bodies that would establish peace. This is again Kant, perpetual peace. This is a guy that even through someone like Montesquieu will argue that through commerce and trade, peace can be established. Okay, and progress will be established through commerce. This is the liberal peace theory, right? This is the liberal or commercial peace theory. Again, this is the origins of liberal peace theory, origin of liberalism, idea of a theory of international relations. Okay, it is by the failure of this and the rise of World War One and the collapse of this led to kind of a critique of it, and this is what led to the initial realism. In other words, the initial realism is it starts out really as a twofold failure. I mean, a kind of realpolitik realism that kind of a kind of return to kind of realpolitik was always available. You can say this is just the kind of cutthroat interest power interest model that doesn't think of peace as the solution, but thinks that war and conflict and advantage is always invented. A kind of what we call mock. The Germans would call this mock politic, right? This was kind of kind of a Machiavellian Thucydidean cast towards it. This idea is not realism. Realism, as we understand in IR theory, would be a product of someone like Morgenthau, Kennan, uh, 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 and oh come on, the kind of Lutheran guy, the Lutheran minister that Obama kind of liked. I'm gonna, the famous. My mind is blanking. His, the children of light, children of darkness. Niemeyer, I think Niemeyer, yeah, I think it's Niemeyer. Reinhold Niemeyer, yes, Reinhold Niemeyer. This is one of the fathers with Morgenthau. Morgenthau, Niemeyer, and kind of someone like Kagan. Um, oh, come on, the uh, uh, X telegram, but so Russian ambition, Soviet ambitions. Kagan, not Kagan. Kagan is the neocon guy, and Frederick Kagan, and then the other one, the other Kagans, right? That's the kind of neocon kind of. No, this is a cake. This is it's what did I say? The realism originally was kind of a kind of an arguing, rejecting some of the the idea of cooperation and positive assumptions of this, right? So that in many ways it was rejecting a lot of the kind of rationalism and corporational model liberalism assumed. Realism was kind of a rejection of this, but it wasn't. It still reflected kind of a lot of the liberal values. In other words, if you look at someone like Morgenthau, even even Reinhard Niebler, they were liberal Democrats. They were not talking about the imperial power or anything else. So therefore, realism was not the realism that they produce is kind of a kind of this criticism of liberalism and arguing that liberalism is not going to get the goals. It's too naive. It's too assumptions. That the self-interestedness is too powerful, and that and this kind of approach, the realist. And now we get so therefore this idea, how do we put Thucydides in relationship to this? Does he really belong in there or not? That's the question. And I think this would be good enough to place to kind of end where um, the general discussion of Thucydides goes. Next time I'll talk, we'll do a reading of Thucydides, and we'll do a short reading of Thucydides. I hope this would be good enough. If you like what we've done, please share with a friend. If you want to see more of this, please do this. Um, uh, um, I hope to have something more later about this. We will go through the 8 books, and we'll go not always do we'll do as couple chapters a day, several chapters a thing a day. So we'll see how it goes. Well, take care. Bye bye.